Hey, this is Anney
and Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff Mom Never Told You, production of iHeartRadio. So today's topic is a bit of a selfish one, a bit of me search, as it's called. But before we really dive into it, I wanted to ask Samantha, are you someone who dreams frequently, who has really vivid dreams? What's your dream experience?
So I know I dream, but I don't always remember my dream. I think I've told you my sleep habit is really kind of odd, and I didn't realize it was odd till people were like, oh, that's not normal, including the night terrors type of thing, in which I am suspended and I can't wake up, but I'm awake, but I'm not. And I didn't realize how little of the population actually experienced that. When I was talking to someone about it, and they were looking at me like, what? I realized, oh, that's not normal. And so I kind of went through a whole thing of trying to sleep paralysis. That's what it is.
Yep.
When I was trying to figure that out, because I don't have sleep terrors, sleep paralysis is what it is, that I was like, oh, so this is not an occurrence for everyone. And I would have it when I was most stressed, which made sense. And especially if I was napping, like it was the prime time of me having a panic attack that I could not wake myself up, even though I am begging myself to open my eyes. But with that, as you and I discussed, because you are more of the dreamer, you have always remembered your dream, which is fascinating to me. I know we're going to talk about it. But for me, it's because I do the sleep and I don't fall all the way to the REM sleep, or someone has woken me up in the middle of that. And so therefore I remember that vividly. And or I'm stress dreaming, which happens a lot.
Yeah. So you don't remember most of your dreams. Would you say you feel like you dream like every night or a lot?
So typically I know there's something there lingering. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I've had some really weird dreams that includes, and I know everybody who analyze dreams, they're going to say, oh, this is this, because I've dreamt about my teeth falling out.
Okay.
But then I've also this one recurring dream of the fact that my contacts are giant contacts that I'm trying to shove into my eyes. I dream that often. Like, it's the weirdest thing. It's like abnormally large contacts that I'm trying to put into my eyes. And I know if I can just start getting it in, it'll fit in. But I'm trying to figure out how to put it in. But that occurs a lot. A lot.
Okay. That's a new one for me, because I feel like of, friends of mine or family members, I know their recurring dreams we talked about them. It's almost always something like being late for something, realizing you were signed up for a class that you didn't know and it's the day of the final.
Right.
That's a big one. Or you can't find your car.
Missing a test. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that one still haunts me.
I just had one recently, actually. I just had one recently, and I was like, I'm not even in freaking class anymore.
Right? Why are you still bothering me with this? So I am someone who probably dreams every night. It's very rare that I don't dream, and they are vivid and long, and I love them almost always. I do have scary dreams that I hate. I have experienced sleep paralysis, and that is terrifying.
Right.
But I like the other day, I had the most wonderful Star Wars dream, and I am somebody who can wake up and fall asleep again.
And find that
and
same
get back in the dream.
I have never talked to anyone who has done this. So maybe I'm the odd one out on this one. But you were the first person to tell me that you can go back to your dream. And I'm like, what? Yes. The only times I've ever done that is a reoccurring dream of the same nightmare. I do nightmares like that. But it's not like it's a continuation. It restarts into a new version for me. But for you to say you can go back to your dreams, fascinating, because I wish I could do that.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, it's heartbreaking when I can't do it, because I'm like, no, I got to get back in. And I think if I try too hard, it doesn't work. You have to just let yourself relax. And that's why one of my favorite times of day is like the dusky twilight periwinkle light before the sun rises. If I wake up then and I had a good dream, I can get back into the dream if I can fall asleep.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and I've also... I have a very embarrassing story where back when I was working for Stuff to Blow Your Mind as the editor which is another podcast on our network, if you don't know, I had some wine one night and I was talking about how cool they did an episode on dreams and how cool it was. And I was curious if anyone experienced this phenomena I experienced. And I wrote in about it and I put in a fake name.
I remember you
But
telling me this.
unfortunately for me, my real name was underneath in the automatic signature. And they contacted me and were like, is this you? And I had to have a moment of how could I lie to get out of this? And then I realized I couldn't and had to admit it. And then they read it on air, I think in part, not as punishment, but as a bit of a, well, you emailed us.
And we're going to answer your question for sure.
Yeah. What I was writing about is I used to have this recurring dream that was like you were watching a TV show every week. Like it would pick up and it would build. And it did this for years. And it was amazing. Like I would be so, I've got to know what happens next. And my friends would be like, it's your brain. You know what happens next. No, I didn't know. It was so surprising all the time. I wrote it in a book. And if we ever get to it in our fiction segment, I will point it out. But it is one of my favorite ideas I've ever had. But it was from a dream. And it was also, I can also lucid dream, but that's much more difficult for me to do. All of this to say, I have just been curious about dreams lately because as Samantha and I were discussing earlier, and we're going to talk about a bit in this podcast, my dreams during the pandemic have really turned up a notch. Like in how bizarre they are, in how vivid they feel, and also how long it feels. Like sometimes I'll wake up and I've only been asleep for an hour and it feels like I've lived an entire year in my life or something. And I know it can't be that long in my brain, but somehow my brain is able to communicate a very long amount of time, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to look into, is this something only I'm experiencing? What is this? And I will say, I have been interested in dreams for a while because I do experience them the way that I do. And so I've looked into why they happen, what our brain is doing. And I will say the consensus is generally, scientists think it's either currently a way of your brain of sort of like sorting through memories and what to store and clearing out what not to store, while also like working through, especially if you got a problem or an emotion you're trying to deal with, which is actually one of the reasons I don't like to procrastinate, because I like to give my brain that time to sit on it and maybe come up with a new solution. Or, interestingly, I was reading today, they think it might be back with our ancestors where there's no, like, when it was dark, and that's it. That it was a way of keeping your visual cortex from getting, like, usurped by other senses at night. Yeah, just basically keeping it active and making sure that it was ready to go, I guess. I'm simplifying it a lot, obviously. But I just think that's really interesting that we still aren't sure. And when you think about it, it's such a fascinating aspect of being a person, that your brain is like, tonight we're going to dream that your droid was kidnapped. Oh, which is a dream I had. I told Samantha about.
I helped you find it though, right?
Yeah, you were involved. We were talking about The Last of Us and I was so happy. And then my droid got kidnapped and you helped me, which is wonderful.
So it's not necessarily kidnapped, but stolen, but okay. I know.
It was kidnapped. And this actually inspired me to write my name on it and its name on it, as if this is going to help at all. But that's an instance of a dream influencing real life outcome. And I started keeping a dream journal just because I do have a lot of ideas and just I'm like, what was this? What was my brain trying to do with all of this? So studies on gender differences in sleep have found that women generally get poorer quality sleep and are more likely to suffer from insomnia. They're also more likely to recall their dreams compared to men. And they also report having more nightmares. Study after study has been done on gender differences when it comes to dreaming. One found, quote, the results confirm earlier findings that men dream more often about men, physical aggression, and sexuality than women. Women's dreams, on the other hand, contain an equal proportion of male and female characters, more aggression turned inwardly, and themes of depression.
I can see that.
Yeah.
There's a lot
I can see
of
that.
my dreams are having to do with something that I have done wrong.
Yeah. And I know, I'm not sure if this is true anymore, but I remember probably over 10 years ago, there was a survey that found that women, the most recurring dream women had was running from someone who meant to hurt them.
Yeah, I've had a lot of dreams of like murderers coming at me and I can't run, but I'm trying to fly, but I can't do that either. I'm just grounded in sand.
Oh no.
It's bad.
That sounds terrible.
It's bad.
That sounds terrible,
I
Samantha.
had one vivid dream of them, like there was a murderer in the house and then there's snipers coming after the murderer, but they're coming after all of us because they're like, just get rid of all of them.
Oh, geez. I frequently have one that I'm awake and there's somebody in the room. And it's just like, I feel like I can't move or I'm too afraid to move.
That's the paralysis part, right?
There.
And you're trying to wake up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes I'm not paralyzed so much as just like, I think in a weird, like I'm not sure that I'm awake or not. I don't know. It's hard to describe. I definitely experienced sleep paralysis though.
Yeah.
And it is very scary. Multiple studies have found that women's dreams have been more negatively impacted than men's during the pandemic. A Harvard study found that women overall expressed lower rates of positive emotions and higher levels of stress, anxiety, anger, and sadness compared to pre-pandemic dreams. There was a similar trend among men, but it was much less pronounced. And given what all we've talked about the disproportionate impact that COVID has had in several ways on women, this makes sense to me.
I mean, if we're talking about the fact that it is partly because of the anxiety and stress that we have these types of dreams, we know that women have been more affected when on this level during the pandemic.
Yes. And if that was already sort of the case before the pandemic, it makes sense to me for sure that it would get more pronounced. And it is definitely something I've noticed. I've had a lot of pandemic dreams and fears around pandemics and people getting sick or even myself getting sick. So that's definitely been a theme. But also, yeah, just I don't know why. Maybe I'm paying more attention. Maybe it's because I'm not as scheduled or regimented as I was before because I'm staying inside. My dreams feel like they've really, really stepped it up.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am with you. I've told you I've got some weird dreams to the point that I'm like, what is going on? And I'm not superstitious necessarily, and I'm not necessarily alternative, like worldly type of things. But some of these I'm thinking, okay, I need to dig into this a little more because I think this is my psyche telling me to get it together.
Yeah. I mean, it's been interesting hearing some of your dreams and the themes that are popping up in them. Shall we
several
say?
times when I had to wake up from like desperately trying to wake up from these dreams because it's so traumatic that I am affected for 2 days by it.
Yeah. Dreams can do that. After my dad died, my mom would just have these horrible nightmares. And it lasted for quite a long time. And I was also curious if dreaming is genetic in any way. She has a lot of dreams and they're very vivid. We were discussing before how in some people's minds it's faux pas or like not interesting to talk about dreams. But my mom and I will discuss and try to analyze.
Again, fascinated by other people's dreams. And because I think there is a level of whether it's your stress, whether it's like what you're going through, or whether it's something that's just out of nowhere, like what? I constantly dream about my past employments. And there's one specific past employment that I cannot stop dreaming about, and I can't figure out why. Because I should have more nightmares about my DFAX job, but I don't.
Yeah. Stuff like that is interesting. It's like, why are you hung up on this?
Right, this one thing that I'm like, I have not talked to any of those people in years. Like in years. Almost to the point that it's coming to decade. And I'm going, why is that in my brain still as if I still work there?
Right. Yeah. It would be so interesting to find out more about that. I have a real anxiety around forgetting things. That's also another reason I don't like procrastinating. So I feel like a lot of the things I dream about, like I think I dreamt about the droid getting kidnapped, which I did dream about it more than once, was because I was afraid I was going to forget it at somebody else's place. And it was just an anxiety that I had. And so now my brain is unable to let go of that anxiety.
Right. So that's the same thing of like trying to go to sleep, but you're scared and you wake yourself up like 4 hours ahead of the time that you're supposed to wake up. So whether you're afraid that you're about to miss an exam and a flight or something, so you wake yourself up extra early thinking you've actually missed it, which I've dreamed that a lot. But I have this weird thing where as a child, because my reality and my fantasy were mixing up with the fact that I didn't know my childhood as an orphaned child, literally living in an orphanage, not knowing the first 7 years history of my life, I mixed dream and reality. And I could not figure out for the longest time what was real and what wasn't. And I still to this day cannot completely tell you other than coming down to analyze, this could not have happened. I could have not seen it from this point of view, but swore as a kid that it did because that's all I had. And I still know those dreams to this day. I can picture it and describe to you those dreams that I had at 7, 8 years old of my past trauma. But it's such a weird concept because I'm like, at that point in time, I believed it because I didn't have anything to tell me otherwise.
Right. Yeah. And that's something we've talked about, I think, briefly in our trauma mini-series, but that is a way. Like, I also had trauma dreams to the point where I couldn't tell what had happened or what had happened because I was dreaming this so much. And I was like, well, is that how it happened? Or did it? Because that's not what I remember.
Right.
But it would just blur. It would get really confusing. So yeah, that's another aspect too. And we know, as we discussed in that mini-series, that women do experience trauma at higher levels. So that also makes sense in terms of what we're talking about here, of women having less good sleep and more nightmares.
So many things.
So many things. Well, listeners, if you have any thoughts about dreams, any dreams you'd like to share, we would love to hear about them. You can email us at stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram at Stuff Mom Never Told You. Thanks as always to our super producer, Christina.
Always a part of the good dreams she is.
Yes, and thanks to you for listening. Stuff Mom Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.